Hi guys, so here is the scene from the Phoenix FD river scene, which I am using for the thinking particles river simulation. Originally this scene was in V-Ray and I switched to final render, and using this FR scene converter we can convert entire scene from V-Ray to final render. Alright, so as you can see the final simulation here with the tracer node, we are adding more particles and these particles are leaking here because I forgot to kill the particles and assign the flow solver here. That's why it's leaking here, but other than it's fine. So I have modeled this line to kill the particles, but I forgot to choose flow solver. Anyway, so this is the final simulation, and I'm going to show how to achieve this result. And we have ran the simulation for 600 frame. It took like 2 hours and 56 minutes, so almost 3 hours, and the particles count was like 600k around. And I have offsetted the cache to see the more particles, as you can see here. So let's start the tutorial and just turn off this tracer dynamic set and set unset, and I will walk through this entire scene. So basically we have this point helper here, which is pointing z direction onto the river, and we scaled this point helper dummy object. It is set to object to particle, and we scaled it down on x-axis and scaled up on y-axis. So the way we are going to emit the particles is using this flow emitter, and we are going to use half subframe for the subsamples. So 0 is per frame and 1 is half subframe, and the simulation will start on frame 1. So we can see this emitter appears here. So emitter, it is sent to flow emitter, and flow emitter assigned water group. There is a foam and tracer group as well as a subgroup, and we are using 200 centimeter per second speed. And if I click on this, so we can see here, and if I scale up emitter, we can see the shape scale as well. And I have assigned one weight to the water particles, that is default, and force we are using is minus 981. So minus shows the negative z direction, and we have this flow groups sim solver setup here. So let's just disable it, and we set up the new one here. And first let's add flow group, then flow boundary, and then flow solver. It is best to use 2 subsample when doing foam. You can use 1 as well or a bit more, but never 0. So I'm using 2 here, and let's rename this flow solver as tutorial, and we will select this flow solver tutorial, and the group we want to assign is water, and we want to affect the foam particles as well, so we include subgroups as well. Now if I play, we we can see it's just going down. Let's change the view to dots. We are doing very low resolution fluke simulation, and then we will up the particle counts. And the flow boundary, let's assign flow solver, and we add this floor, stones, and these IV objects, and we make the bias to 0.5 so it collides well. So now particles are colliding, but there isn't much in the volume, so let's change that. One more important thing, that when I'm using flow group, I have this edit on the fly turned off, so whatever changes I will do to this flow group, it will show up here. So first of all, I will reduce density to 2 and radius to 8, 10, 12. We want to have even blue color here, so increase the radius until it looks good. So yeah, this looks good. I will use 19, and we are seeing red particles because we aren't using decompress much, so we want to decompress particles, so let's make it 400. Yes, now there are no pink particles, and we can see that if we switch to camera view. So we are getting this nice simulation by default. Let's assign a little bit tension, surface tension. Do not go very extreme like 1, otherwise it will be very strong surface tension. A little bit of friction and bouncing. Let's keep the radius to 8 so we get more smooth surface, less chaotic. It will go a little bit slow, but it's less chaotic. Now we want to create the foam particles, so let's create the time interval condition and assign it to foam. So whenever we want to set it to 20 to 1000 frames, so it will start at the 20 frame and foam will show up on 20th frame. And in flow group, on the foam tab, we assign foam group, and let's turn on pattern as well, but let's see without pattern first. I will change this so to none now, and we can see the foams are appearing here. And that is without pattern. Let's increase this maximum counts to more, so there will be more forms. As you can see, there are more forms generating. So let's see the form pattern, and I will just switch to form pattern and play. We are seeing all white because margin is set to 1, and let's turn on pattern and change margin to 0.1 and bias to 5. So we can see this pattern is very small, so let's increase it 20, 30, 40, 50. So we want to have this large pattern clearly visible, and let's keep the margin to 0.05 and bias to 8. So we want to emit the particles from the thin edges. Now if I play, we will see foam pattern appearing, so it appears from there. We also want to change these settings. So density, we are using 2 for the fluid, So for the foam I will set to 0.2. Mass factor is also important, so let's set it to 0.15, and rates we keep it 30, viscosity to fluid 0.2, and viscosity to foam 0.6, and let's give lifespan to 50. And we want to have these foam particles stick together, so assign for tension value to like 4. Now if I play, we see it appears on the pattern. Let's increase it to 80 centimeter. One more thing, we can increase wave curvature 5, 3, so this will appear on the edges only of the wave peaks. And vorticity, let's increase it as well, 2.5. ISO value we can reduce it, but more than 3 will not make any changes. 1 or 2 will be fine. Let's keep it 2. And if I play now, we can see the foam pattern as well appearing. Maybe wave curvature to 2, and we can play with the mass factor, that will give different pattern. If we reduce mass factor to 0.05, we will see more foam particles. See, it increases, and 0.1 or 0.3 will create more particles on the peaks of the wave. So let's keep it 0.08, 0.1 maybe. And if we change density value to some same as fluid density, it will create more foam particles or less. Yeah, it create more. And if we reduce, it will create less. That depends on this mass factor, so these two also controls this foam creation. So just play around and find the right setting. Let's visualize foam pattern once again, and we can just try this offset y, offset x. We can see this x direction is this direction, so we can animate this value as well. So it goes reverse, so we want to animate to negative. So I just turn off, go to last frame and animate negative value minus 50 minus 100, and starting value to 0. Now if I play, okay, it's non-animatable. Rather we need to animate this time shift, so let's check that time shift. I will just see in track view and just delete the just delete the keyframe. So let's see the time shift, and see if it is possible to animate. No, so it will do automatically time shift on the negative direction. Let's delete the keyframe. Set it to none, so we see the foam pattern here, which is moving, I think. And if I change the view to pixel, we can see it's very low resolution simulation. So I will load the simulation which I did. I will just delete this and turn on this dynamic set. Actually I forgot to assign flow solver here, so it didn't delete the particles. So I will just set the reverse simulation again, that cache file, and let's keep it play. Now we talk about tracer node. So I just turn on, and I will just disable this one and create the new one, new operator tracer. And we want to create more foam particles, so we select source foam as foam, and tracer we assign to subgroup of the foam tracer, and we create tracer. So now if I play, we can see there isn't much visible. So if I increase the factor 5 or 10, you can see it. So we have it set to at start, so it will create only particles at the beginning. We want to create on the bird, so let's switch to bird. And for the trace, let's change the type to trilinear as well for better. Yes, this dynamic set is turned off, so I will turn it on. So for the default setting, it is set to at start. That is what we want to use, because at birth it will create the particles at birth only. So if I select birth, it will create on the first frame on the birth only. No, it's actually reverse. At start it will create at the start only, and it will not then create particles anymore. So you can see it's reducing to 0 particles. So we want to use at birth, and factor to 5 or 3, and if I play now, we can see more particles. We can control the area of these tracer particles by radius. So smaller radius will create less particles in less area. If we use large radius, it will create more particles on the surrounding. At the same time, we can also control this by radius here. So like this. And we can assign the size and control the foam and tracer particles both at the same time. So what I will do is just disable this tracer and enable this one. can see it creates like 1.8 million particles for the tracer node, and foams are 1,47,000, and the tracer is 1.8 million. And how to render it, I have assigned OpenVDB shape and set to water with render resolution view 2.3 and viewport view as well 0.3 as well. So if I turn on, enable it, and select show mesh, and if I click here, we can see the mesh here, and we can see the foam particles as well. And I have assigned this bluish material to the water mesh. Let's make it to murky green. Like a forest river, and this one as well. And for the foam particles, I have this very simple white material that is set to 1 diffuse value and 0.3 transparency and 0.4 glossiness with index of reflection to 1 and reflectivity as well. So it is very simple material, and we select thinking particles and turn on motion blur. So object properties, turn on motion blur, and go to camera, and we enable motion blur as well with frames. And one more thing, we want to assign shape, that is sphere, to foam particles. So before doing that, let's turn on show mesh in the viewport and click this force these settings, and let's turn on standard shape, and I will press Ctrl S. So I also move foam particles position to a little bit up, so those particles which are under the water mesh, it will appear a little bit more up. And if I play now, so we will have more on the height this foam particle. If I set it to 0, it will be original position, and 5, it will be a little bit up. And we have math operator set to vector vector plus addition, and foam particle set to sphere, and assign this material, and size is controlled here, that is 2 centimeter. So now if I press F10, its exposure is very strong, we can reduce, and we can also reduce the foam particle size. So we just don't want to move the particles up position, let's keep it 0, and little bit more transparency for these foam particles, and this one 5, and we select the camera and set the ISO exposure to 13, click render. You can also render foam particle with Phoenix FD foam shader. So now it's just too much transparent and it's not visible. have to move the position of the foam particles. So now foam particles are visible. We have to change the size of the foam particles. So let's reduce it, and the way we will do is just disable this one here and just directly assign to the foam particles here, and it will assign to tracer particles as well because it is set to subgroup. So 1 centimeter we try 0.7 and a little bit of variation. Now we can see nice foam here. Even we can reduce a little bit more, like 0.5, and let's create more tracer. So let's create 8 with 3 here, and let's try 10 for the factor, so it will create more particles, and hit render. As you can see, it's pretty fast to calculate all the forms and then instance with final render. So now it creates more particles for the foam. Now let's see for the further frames how it renders. So we have like 2 million particles, around 2.5 millions, and we hit render. We can see the foam particles here. If we make fluid more transparent, we can see one more. So let's make it to like 40 here. And one thing we can do is in thinking particles, we reduce the radius for the tracer particles. So I just go to frames 1, set it to 1, and this one as well, maybe 0.5 to this one. Let's keep it 1, so it doesn't create very long trails of the particles. and set this point to 5, this vector to position, so it will be more on the top. So now it's 1 million particles around, which is less, but let's see how it looks. And we reduce transparency as well. So very thin line, maybe we want to increase the radius, and that way it will be better. So for the tracer particles, let's keep it 3 here and 3 here. So we can see the foam particles now, and hit render. As you can see, it creating 71 million faces. We can see it here, 71 million faces. Yeah, now we get the form with the motion blur. What we can do is we can change the material and make it less transparent, and also increase the foam particle size. So this will be our last change. Let's keep it 0.7. So now foam is more visible. We can also increase transparency a bit because now it's too strong. So let's increase transparency to 0.7. So that's it. This is the final result, and we can render this out. So it creates forms where the stones are. It's colliding with the stones. That's where it creates forms. So I hope you like this tutorial and enjoyed it. Thank you.